Well, thank you very much, Jo. And first of all, I would really like to recommend the authors, particularly the chair, for writing such a clear and what I consider to be a very urgent paper on the use of AI in the media and technology sector. I think it's the first of its kind. And I think this is a much needed analysis of the most urgent themes facing the EU, facing citizens, and I completely underwrite its conclusions and also its recommendations. I also would like to highlight a few points from the report that I think deserve the attention of policymakers, particularly at the EU levels. And my suggestions concern, first of all, the need for stronger European regulation vis-à-vis tech companies, for instance. And secondly, the need for AI governance across sectors, not just the media and technology sector, while also applying this to digital infrastructure. My first point concerns the necessity for European lawmakers to regulate a rapidly evolving technology sector on the basis of public values and principles that underpin democracies. Now, some of the recommendations in the report do indeed address the need for co-regulation and oversight, particularly on AI explainability and transparency, and now I quote, especially with regards to the architectural elements for algorithmic amplification. First of all, I completely agree with this recommendation, but I also think that the need for regulation, for regulating these issues, should be articulated in much stronger terms. For the past 2 decades, I think lobbyists in Brussels have convinced lawmakers that regulation sort of hinders innovation. But in my view, regulation has been the core of European innovation. So the use of AI should be governed by a few core principles, and that is articulated very well in the report, such as ownership of and the control over data, data portability, and mandatory interoperability between platforms. Big tech, however, is not going to self-regulate these issues. And if lawmakers are serious about defining the architectural elements, not just for algorithmic amplification, but for the entire digital society's blueprint, we cannot just leave this to companies. And multi-stakeholder agreements are fine, they're very necessary, but if the principles on which these agreements are built are unclear, if participation is non-committal and voluntary, and if there are no sanctions for non-compliance, this will inevitably benefit the most powerful actors. Now, my second point concerns the need for AI governance across sectors, not just in the media and technology sectors. And I know that there will be, a lot more sectors up for discussion in these 2 days. But the problem is that many of the uses and applications of AI technologies, as described in this report, are not specific to the media sector. They're not specific to one sector, but they're built into the digital architecture of platform ecosystems. Now, we can govern the problems of AI-mediated content moderation in the media sector, but the problem of power concentration and data control is rooted much deeper in the infrastructural levels, the infrastructural services on which every sector has come to depend. Think, for instance, of services or data centers, which are built rapidly across the EU right now without any prior agreement on how data should be stored, accessed, processed, or distributed, except for the general use of data under, excuse me, the GDPR. Now, one of the report's recommendations states that and now I quote, an EU-wide dynamic and mandatory high-risk assessment should specifically focus on the potential risks and societal impacts arising in the media and technology sector. But such high-risk assessment should not be restricted to AI applications used in this particular sector. It should also apply more fundamentally to the architecture of the infrastructural layer on which all of these sectoral applications are built. If the conditions for storing and processing, distributing the data in large facilities, which are owned and operated by big tech companies, cannot be externally controlled and reviewed, it will be futile to focus on the sectoral implications of these conditions. So in other words, if we don't attend to the very principles of data power, how it's generated, how it's controlled, etc., it will be very hard to regulate this at the sectoral level. In short, without applying a set of principles about data control across sectors and without implementation of these principles in the legal frameworks at the EU level, it will be almost impossible to regulate the numerous AI applications that are already developing at lightning speed. Well, I'm very much looking forward to the discussion of today, and once again, I really recommend the authors of this report for writing such a succinct and very important analysis of how this sector works.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor van Dijck, for this really enlightening and contribution on the report and the outcome. I would now like to give the floor to Professor Hellberger for her take on the report.